Hi, Thriller Recaps here. Today, I am going to explain the movie, The Walk, explaining every scene as it happens. Watch till the end, and please like, share and subscribe if you enjoy this. The movie begins as Philippe Petit stands atop the Statue of Liberty, telling the audience that he does not fear death and never says the word except for when he is explaining himself, and that is why he walked on the wire. This inspired him to attempt the impossible, walking the Twin Towers. He takes the audience back to Paris, France, in 1973, where he used to be a street performer playing to dazzled crowds. However, Philippe was always running from the police for performing without a permit, as he doesn't believe in getting a permit. While collecting money from the viewers, he tosses a jawbreaker that a girl gave him, performs little tricks with it, and catches it in his mouth. He accidentally bites into it, causing him pain. Philippe goes to the dentist and finds a magazine advertising the unfinished Twin Towers of the World Trade Center in New York. He is instantly bewildered and tears the page out of the magazine. His dream had begun. A flashback to when Philippe was a child and first saw high-wire walkers at the circus comes on. He would begin to practice it at home and get better at it, to his father's dismay. He finds out he has the talent for juggling, walking on ropes, and climbing, but claims he wants to know more. One day, as an adult, Philippe attempted to walk the wire in the circus tent, which he had snuck into, only to be caught by the circus owner Rudy Omenkowski, also known as Papa Rudy. Rudy chases Philippe away until Philippe grabs some items off the ground and starts juggling them, impressing Rudy. Rudy begins to help him to salute after a performance. Rudy wants him to perform in the circus, but Philippe tells him he's not going to be a circus clown as he's an artist. Rudy throws him out. Philippe leaves his home and parents, who try to stop him behind to pursue his dream. He claims he didn't even know what he was looking for, but figures he might find it in Paris. Philippe rides his unicycle into town with his bags and sees a lady named Annie who is singing and playing her guitar before a crowd of onlookers. Philippe decides to set up his own little performance circle and quickly steals Annie's audience. She later approaches him with disdain, but Philippe defends himself and says he only wanted to share the audience with Annie and didn't even invade her space. He decides to play anytime she's not playing so as not to steal her audience next time. It starts to rain, and Philippe walks with her under his umbrella and learns her name. He praises her for her beautiful voice and reveals he's going to New York. Quickly, he wins her over. He tells her of his wire-walking dreams and how he wants to do it at the Twin Towers. She supports his dreams, and soon, they fall in love, leading Annie to become Philippe's first accomplice in setting up his wire walk. Annie begins to wire walk with him also. Philippe meets and befriends Jean-Louis, a photographer who becomes Philippe's second accomplice. He tells Jean of his dream to walk on the Twin Towers. Jean is also a skilled archer that can shoot an arrow with the proper wiring from one tower to the other. While talking with Jean, the wire Philippe practices on snaps, and he falls to the ground. He goes back to Rudy and asks him to help him practice wire walking with the promise of payment. He's allowed to travel with Rudy's troupe but wasn't allowed to perform. A few weeks later, Philippe did his first official wire walk in the park over a lake while there is a fishing contest going on. The fishermen boo him, causing him to break his concentration and fall into the lake. Still determined, Philippe decides to use the towers of Notre Dame as part of his next performance. He sets up the wires at night with his photographer friend and walks as the tourists show up in the early hours of the day. Although his walk is successful, Philippe is arrested. The news gets in the papers, and Philippe is pissed. He feels the French don't regard him. He's still ranting when Annie shows him a picture of the Twin Towers. Philippe sees it as a sign, and he and immediately move to New York. They see the almost completed Twin Tower, which Philippe admires but immediately believes it can't be done as there's no scale on the tower. Philippe, however, finds his way to the top and tells Anne to go back to the hotel. Standing on the edge of the tower, he looks down and realizes how far the ground is. He mutters how impossible it'll be but is determined to do it. He goes back to the hotel to meet Anne and meets his third accomplice, Jean-François, also known as Jeff, an algebra teacher that only speaks English in math equations. Philippe tries to convince him. Rudy also helps him and convinces him to use a safety belt as the height is too risky. Philippe doesn't want to as he sees it as a cowardly act, and tells him to apologize to Rudy, who's already pissed, and stop acting like a kid. Rudy urges Philippe to use a safety harness, as he would not even let his own sons walk at a great height without safety harnesses, but Philippe refuses, saying it would defeat the purpose of what he hoped to accomplish. Rudy decides to stand behind Philippe's choice and he gives him all the payment money back to allow him to pursue his dream. The team begins to practice their skills. Philippe plans what he calls the coup for August 6, 1974, since it'll be right before the towers are complete and the weather will be fine. The crew returns to New York, and Philippe begins going undercover in different disguises to learn measurements, distance to get an idea of how he's going to pull off the coup. On one of his encounters, he dresses as an architect, but he accidentally steps on a nail that impales his foot. Despite this, he refuses to seek treatment and wants to keep going as his big event is in 3 weeks' time. He decides to use crutches and gets pitted by the people. He's caught by Barry Greenhouse, who recognizes him and praises his bravery. Barry Greenhouse, who becomes the inside man since he works on the 82nd floor of the South Tower, becomes an accomplice. Philippe next meets Jean-Pierre, an American that speaks French and gives Philippe a wired radio to avoid having the cops pick up their chatter. Jean, who's later tasked with getting more accomplices, then introduces Philippe to Albert and David, the final 2 accomplices. As the date of the coup approaches, Philippe appears to be losing his mind due to nervousness. Jean suggests they wait, but Philippe doesn't want to hear any of that. He gets a crate with the wires, which he refers to as his coffin. He bangs the nails on the crate loudly at night, waking Annie and making her angry when he refers to it as his coffin. She expresses her concern for his well-being. They have a little argument about the event. Philippe expresses his fear and she assures him that he'll be fine. August 6th arrives, and the crew begins to initiate the coup. Philippe, Jeff, Jean, and David disguise themselves as delivery men to take the wires to the top of the South Tower. At first, they are stopped by a cop who later allows them to go. They are not allowed access to the elevator as they're being rented out by other workers. Jean convinces one of the men working in the tower and allows the men to make the delivery. After getting everything to the top, David begins to panic when he thinks the cops are coming after him, leaving Philippe and Jeff up there. The men prepare to set up when it's nighttime, but their work is interrupted by a guard's walkie-talkie, forcing the 2 to hide in a tarp that happens to be placed over a shaft. Jeff becomes terrified, while his fear only makes Philippe hallucinate for a short while. The guard passes out, allowing Philippe and Jeff to get to the roof. They see Jean-Louis and Albert on the roof of the North Tower, and Jean-Louis shoots the arrow with the string attached. Philippe doesn't hear the arrow making an impact, so he frantically tries to feel for the string, going as far as taking his clothes off and jumping around. He spots the arrow hanging over the side of the roof, and he catches it before it falls. He and Jeff continue to set up the wiring, only to hear the guard approaching the steps. The 2 hide, and the guard is called away for some pizza. They continue setting up using an invincible fishing hook. They almost flop and lose their rope, but Philippe is luckily able to save the rope. It's almost morning. Albert decides to give up because he thinks Philippe will fail, and he also plans to sell off photographs himself. Philippe tries to convince him and promises to give up if they don't get the wiring right. Annie watches them all through the night. The wiring is almost complete when an unknown man goes up to the roof. He says nothing and only looks around briefly before looking at Philippe approvingly. Philippe states that he referred to this man as the mysterious visitor. The wiring is tight and complete, and Philippe starts to put on his costume, but his turtleneck falls over the building as he's on the edge of the building. Annie thinks Philippe is falling but feels better when she realizes it's just his shirt. He is angry because he doesn't want to do the walk in his undershirt, but he decides to do it anyway. Philippe grabs his balancing pole and begins to make his daring walk over the wire. Annie, Barry, and JP watch from the ground, calling attention to the other New Yorkers. Philippe carefully makes his steps over the wire before making it to the North Tower. The people cheer and applaud him from below. Not feeling completed, Philippe claims that he felt the wire was still calling to him, so he walks back toward the South Tower. 2 officers show up on the roof and detain Jeff. Philippe decides to walk back toward the North Tower to taunt the cops. More cops show up on the North Tower as he approaches it. The cops try and carefully talk him into walking back toward them, but Philippe only frightens them by laying on the wire and dancing on it before getting up when a bird passes over him. Philippe finally walks back to the South Tower and surrenders calmly after deciding to leave his wire in victory. The walk ends, and the crowd cheers for him. Later, a construction worker tries to saw the wire. Philippe is arrested, but the cops are more amazed than angry. Everyone claps for him, including the construction workers. Philippe's story becomes worldwide news, and even Rudy is proud of Philippe. He and his crew celebrate their victory. Philippe thanks his team for believing in him. The New Yorkers begin to love the tower. Philippe narrates that the judge mandated that he do a free high-wire performance in Central Park for families, which he was more than happy to do. He decided to stay in New York and become a New Yorker. Unfortunately, Annie decided to return to France so she can follow her own dreams. Philippe also states that he was given a pass to access the top of the towers whenever he wanted, but with a semi-playful condition that he must not use it to repeat his high-wire stunt there. He noted that the passes have an expiration date, but the director crossed out the expiration date and wrote, "Forever," and the smile fades from Philippe's face before he walks off screen. The movie ends with one last shot of the towers, which unfortunately are there no more. Don't forget to subscribe, as this encourages us to make more videos daily. It also helps with the YouTube algorithm. Please, like, share and subscribe. We love you and we'll see you in the next video.